All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We're really excited today to share some of the great findings from this latest second commissioned e-commerce report that we worked on with our friends at Forrester. So before we jump in, what I'd like to do is just make sure everyone's familiar with the platform and understands how to use the tool. Looks like folks have found the chat. Chat's over on the right. And you can ask questions there. You can say hello there. There is also a Q&A tab there as well, where you can ask questions and we will respond as quickly as possible. Or our experts supporting us backstage will help respond as well. We have a document tab where you're able to actually download the study very, very quickly. We will be talking through the slides, and any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat. I also, at some point later in the presentation, will be putting up a poll to ask you all some questions, and you'll see that pop up, and you'll be able to jump in. It's right on the left side of your screen, and be able to answer some questions. So with that, I'd like to very happily welcome our guest speaker, Sucharita Kodali. Sucharita, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Howard. For those of you who may not know Forrester, Forrester is a technology research company. We're headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we work with companies that are I work specifically with companies that are either retailers or brands and the technology ecosystem that supports that sector of the economy. I've been at Forrester for about almost 20 years and have been in the retail industry for nearly 30. And we're going to talk a lot about commerce, e-commerce, and digital commerce today.
Thanks, Sucharita, and very happy to also welcome my partner in crime here at Catchpoint, Leo.
Hello, team. Leo, Vasiliou, and lest you worry about my product marketing title, just know that I spent 17 years in the IT operations trenches before moving to the dark side, and I've still got the battle scars to prove it. Having said that, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to speak with Sucharita and team to discuss the data with fellow researchers. So back over to you, Howard.
Thanks, Leo. I don't know if we're the dark side. I mean, maybe that's more sales than marketing, but all good. All right, so Sucharita, shall we jump in?
Yeah.
Oops,
so I'll walk you through our the methodology here in this study. So a few years ago, Catchpoint commissioned Forrester. We have a consulting team at Forrester that conducts and actually does a lot of the actual legwork on these studies. But it was essentially a thought leadership study, and we did two tranches. We did one in 2023 and another in 2025. And the goal was to explore internet performance monitoring. So you're going to hear the acronym IPM through this entire presentation, and that's what it refers to. And we wanted to explore the importance of it for consumer brands and retailers, and in particular, the impact that it has of actually having not only an actual deployment, a set of deployments and technology to support IPM, but also the costs of failures and the widespread nature of failures, really. So that is essentially what this study is designed to capture. We looked at different regions of the world because we wanted a global perspective. So we have representation and survey responses from the US, Canada, Germany, France, and the UK, as well as Singapore and Australia. So some representation in the APAC region as well. This was a B2B survey. So we asked people who were leaders in their respective commerce organizations that would have insight and visibility. So they tended to be in either e-commerce or digital roles. And the total sample set and you had to have at least 1,000 employees within your organization, because we did want to filter out any very, very small or even medium-sized orgs. So that's a little bit of the background.
Thanks, Sucharita. And I'll just kind of ask for the comments about doing it 2 years ago. Is there any particular way our audience should think about, or maybe what I'm trying to ask is, why would our audience appreciate the fact that orgs like Catchpoint commission orgs like Forrester to redo and re-research data that's already been researched? Why would our listeners appreciate that?
Yeah, a lot of it is just the timeliness and seeing how things are trending in one direction or another. That's really the importance of the time series nature of it. It certainly wasn't a study that took 2 years. It was more we wanted 2 discrete data points and to see how trends were evolving and shifting. One of the things that I often find is that many of the retailers and brands that I talk to often like to have the most updated data. So naturally, for them, as in particular, as they're making business cases for a particular deployment or an investment, it makes more sense to have data from 2025 versus a few years ago. But that comparison is crucial to just understand how things are trending. And also it in many ways helps to validate how things are progressing over time, particularly with respect to technology investments.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And pardon the interruption. So I'll go ahead and just let you continue.
Yeah. So this is at the highest level, some of the reasons for being, which is at the end of the day, consumers and employees. So it is both the people who work on your teams and are dependent on technology, as well as end shoppers. They expect flawless digital experiences. When you see nearly 3/4, 72% of respondents say that consumer tolerance for disrupted experiences is really at an all-time low, and no doubt because their expectations, they see fast internet speeds. We're at I think 5-6G around the world, so these things are incredibly a high bar for every company to really meet. What you also have is that the workplace also expects frictionless digital experiences, because every employee is also a consumer, and they have been honed on strong experiences across different devices, touching multiple applications within even a single website experience. So all of these elements are absolutely essential. Just to give you a sense also, from some of my other research that's more industry broad, retail in the world is a $25 trillion sector. It covers consumers are spending nearly 1/4 of the world's GDP on goods, and about 20% of that, nearly $5 trillion. I hope I said trillion. I'm talking so fast. I sometimes misspeak. But so global retail is 25 trillion. E-commerce globally is $5 trillion. So it is large. It is not a trivial number. It's 5% of all of global GDP. And China and the US alone comprise about 3 trillion of that $5 trillion. And then you have the major markets in the rest of the world comprising the other 2 trillion. So these are huge, huge sectors of consumer spend. They're a huge sector of the global economy, and they're growing faster than they're growing faster than all of retail, and it's growing faster than other sectors as well. So in that world, when you have such a large portion of spend, you have it growing quickly, and you have the expectations for performance being as high as they are, you have this need to really make sure that that digital experience is as smooth and seamless and as top-notch as it really can be. But now, all that said, kind of this is what the data says. This is a lot of my experience in conversations I've had with retailers and brands. But Howard and Leo, what are your reflections on this as well? I'm sure your customers also say similar things,
Yes,
have similar findings.
100%, Sucharita. We're seeing very similar things across our customers. Our customers are cross-industry. They tend to be leaders in their industries, in their respective markets. And what we're hearing from them is that their customers are demanding great customer experiences. But it's, as you said as well, it's not just their customers. Their employees also are demanding frictionless experiences. They don't want to show up at work and have things not work. It's got to be seamless. Things have to work better. And, we're really talking about minimizing outages, minimizing disruptions, protecting revenue, improving conversions, improving employee experiences. And all of it really ties together to help organizations grow.
Absolutely.
Now, we're going to get into a couple of more detailed examples as we go through, but these are just a few of the organizations that we're working with today.
Great. So I want to step back and talk a little bit about the data on disruptions. And what we see from the data is, in fact, disruptions are a daily occurrence. And this is something that, and we'll talk in a moment about the kinds of disruptions, but at the kind of the places where they occur, how they impact organizations is not trivial. So what you have in green are the types of disruptions and the places where those disruptions exist, where it's 1 to 5. So that's a relatively modest number. As you go through the charts, you'll see that there are times, there are, kind of a number of problems, like particularly with hosting partners or APIs and gateways, where on average there's a higher number of disruptions. You have the yellow and the blue being substantially lower. With hosting partners, you have kind of 50% of the disruptions being kind of 50% of the disruptions are 6+ times a day, which is really quite extraordinary. On the other hand, you have things like websites themselves, where it's actually probably a smaller number of disruptions, in large part because I think in tech organizations, those are some of the most visible ones. It's a lot of the partnerships and the things that are under the that may impact form fields that get submitted, or other parts of the flow of an entire transaction that may not get as noticed, but yet they're there, and they're very problematic. And as you'll see in a couple of slides, they cost money too. Now, all this said, Leo, what does this say about the state of the industry?
I mean, I'm just going to have a reaction, which I think might be the same as everyone else. When you look at the big blue number, 72 average number, that probably means larger orgs experience more. That is more costly, right? So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, despite our best intentions. But to me, it reads that it's not a problem you can simply stuff down into the IT closet, if you will, right? It's a real business problem. And I mean, just looking at some of those components, right? So websites, internet stack components, connectivity, reachability, proprietary apps, point of sale devices, your physical locations are everything else on the list is like the highlight. What it does for me is highlight the need for visibility into our various stack components. And this is a conversation about IPM, right, Internet Performance Monitoring, and we have a long way to go. I don't want to misrepresent, but as we'll see, early adopters of Internet Performance Monitoring are seeing the benefits, and I think we're going to get into that here in a minute. And so, Sucharita, if I could maybe just kind of transition back over to you, I want to talk about kind of how we opened this session with is that what were the numbers? 72% acknowledging tolerance for disruptions at an all-time low, 67% for saying their workforce requires the same frictionless experience. So we're starting to paint a picture here, and I think people can start to see where we're going. So I just wanted to ask you, what are the actual business abilities that people should be evaluating to proactively ensure and meet those expectations?
Right. Right. And absolutely, Leo. The truth is that when you have so many of these small disruptions that are happening, that can be pretty catastrophic. And often they may not be as visible, but yet, kind of you have them chipping away at different parts of an operation, whether it is how consumers can access content, or whether content can get uploaded in an accurate fashion, or whether information is flowing back and forth in, kind of the fulfillment center and the warehouse. All of these are absolutely essential, and they can cause big problems. So I think that that's really what the heart of this is about, which is that often the large disruptions are some of the most visible, but we tend to see a lot of small daily problems, and even in some cases, a lot of daily problems that are creating problems for organizations. So this is absolutely part of the issue. And one of the single biggest reasons that these disruptions are so problematic is that there is a negative ROI. There is an enormous cost that is associated with any type of disruption. When we ask the respondents in the survey, what was the business impact? You'll see that there are any number of challenges, and some of the most visible ones that we hear about are things like increased customer churn, and of course, revenue is gone, because if there is an issue with the site, you're unable to transact, and that of course adversely impacts whether or not you are making as much money as you could make. You have reputational damage. You have just ultimately just a bad customer experience, which can result in things like low and net promoter scores, or other adverse ways that consumers may choose not to transact. In other scenarios, you also have workforce issues where some of your employees may be so frustrated that they may quit, or they may go to competitors, or it just may cause them frustration altogether. And not to mention reduced workforce productivity, because certainly when there is a problem or an outage, whatever was the task that you had originally assigned, the real jobs of these employees can't get completed. Now, one little aside to the increased employee churn that I do want to mention, and this is something that I hear often from executives, is that there is never a trivial scenario in which often the outages may be noticed by a C-level executive or somebody in the C-level executive's family, and they will, kind of make prompt phone calls to whoever is the head of the tech department, and kind of demand that the issue be resolved. And those are often, kind of 3 alarm fires where everything needs to be dropped to investigate something, and often the problem can't even easily be replicated. And those are the scenarios that for developers who just want to do their job and, kind of do the bigger programs and the goals that they were assigned to do. When they have to step back and deal with these fire alarms, it's very, very frustrating. And this is definitely something that I hear IT organizations constantly grappling with. So, kind of you have this long chain where you have the problems, and the problems lead to, kind of all sorts of issues that are related to both revenue as well as your ability to operate as a strong business. What about, do you guys have thoughts that you want to share and add there?
Yeah, I mean, so very much we're talking about experience and ensuring that continued experience and the resilience, so that when there is a disruption, we can bring the business back very, very quickly, and we're ready to respond to any disruption to minimize the MTTR. We've talked a lot about what the impact of these disruptions are. Maybe Leo, can you tell us a little bit about maybe an organization that has leveraged internet performance monitoring to help?
I can. And what I want to say on this one is, coincidentally, it speaks to both customer experience and workforce experience. To how we opened the presentation, I just want to say that's a pure coincidence. We did not plan it. Not that far-sighted, but what we've got here, large organization, extremely revenous. That is to say, high revenue. I don't even know if revenous is a word. We can't say who, but think the type of organization that makes the front page if there's a large incident. Now, what happened here was there was a major internet stack incident that prevented not only customers from being able to reach, transact, i.e., spend money with their organization, but also the workforce. They themselves prevented the workforce from reaching and transaction, and even worse, being able to find and fix what was going on, right? Hours and hours went by, and eventually they started to figure it out. When they did, they said that can never ever happen again. And so they went through their research phase, right, their own buyer journey, and they selected Catchpoint. Now, there are a couple things I want to just kind of call out here. So I always like to talk about things like you're trying to achieve a goal, an objective, a business outcome, whatever you want to say there. You need certain capabilities to do so. And then you measure the success by metrics, right? So we need the ability to ensure performance. We need the ability to have as minimal time to repair as possible. And here are some of the metrics, the quantifiable metrics that they themselves came to us and said, right, improve by 30%. Excuse me, reduce user reported issues by 20%, and so on and so forth. What's very cool about this is after they got a handle on the major pain, then they started to realize what additional capabilities were possible, and they started to this continual optimization journey for things that they didn't even know existed with IPM before. So I just kind of like to mention that, because it's not a one and done type of thing, right? It's a continual journey, because the expectations of your customers are also going to continually rise. So that's how I like to marry those two, right? Continually rising expectations married with continual optimization. So Sucharita, back to you. We've talked about capabilities, we've talked about outcomes, we've talked about some of the pain, some of the metrics. Let's get to some of the grit here. Let's talk about additional dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the slides that I'd promised earlier, which is the cost of disruptions. And in addition to the fact that there are so many disruptions, we have the total cost. And this is essentially the monthly cost that the respondents to the survey said that they experience. Now, there is good news here, which is, as you'll recall, we did 2 tranches of the survey, and the numbers from 2023 to 2025 do appear to be declining. When you see the numbers less than 50,000 or between 50 and 100 and even up to 500,000, those numbers have gone up, while some of the $1 million plus costs have gone down, which is definitely the direction that we want to head in. But still, you have the majority of problems being a 6-figure sum across all of the respondents. So in the retail world and the brand world that has consumers, these are companies that on a monthly basis are experiencing more than $100,000 in cost, which means that they're experiencing 7 figures in costs due to these outages annually. And that is of what they've actually measured. That typically means revenue alone. That's not considering things like the cost of higher employee churn or customer dissatisfaction, which may lead to lower lifetime value or other issues that are more difficult to quantify. This typically tends to be just, kind of our conversion rate was down or our website was down for a certain number of days or hours, and kind of what is the average cadence of how much revenue that would have generated in a perfect state. So these are really some of the things that we think are absolutely important to consider. Anything to add, Howard?
Yeah. So funny enough, I was at dinner a few weeks back with one of our large customers, retail customers, that I'm sure many of us have taken a cart into and filled up that complete cart with giant boxes of all sorts of food and, probably some clothing and supplies. And we were talking about some of the findings from this report. And he said to me, and his role is basically as head of observability for that organization. And he said to me, is like, in my role, can I be the person that why would I want to be the person that makes the decision to not invest in a solution like IPM to be able to respond to these types of disruptions quickly versus be the one responsible for these kinds of losses? And it really just has been something that has stuck with me. And he said it a whole lot more eloquently than I just did. But, when you start looking at these dollars, and for our larger organizations, having a monthly loss of almost $1 million a month, I mean, that's such a crazy amount of money. Leo, I know you're going to talk about one of our customer stories, and I'll let you jump there, but even that customer had announced something pretty amazing. Actually, I think you talk about it in just a little bit, but anyway, I'll let Sucharita get back to. There we go.
Yeah, and there's another element too, because we talk about explicit disruptions, and then there are other elements too, which is just slowness, right? And you have latency, and arguably, if the website or your internet pages are just slow, or your apps are slow, that's almost as deadly as being down altogether. And this is absolutely something that the respondents agree with, and certainly as even a user of the internet, this is likely something that you agree with as well. Leo, I know that you have some thoughts on this as well, particularly from your client perspective.
If I could just take a moment to say that performance and performance analytics all those advanced crazy maths of analyzing long tails, deviations, etc., are like an amateur hobby of mine. I say that to say that performance is very near and dear to my heart, right? So it's not about straight outages, even slowdowns. And if you don't believe me, next time you go through a drive-through or try to place an order or walk up to a register, say, can I have a, whatever iced coffee, remain silent and count Mississippis and wait to see how long the person goes, I'm sorry, can I take your order? Right. It probably won't be more than a second or two. Right. Um, uh, but I think I said it, I think I alluded to it a moment ago, right? The continual rise of user expectation, an evolution, if you will, which is one of the things we did with this refresh. The 2025 data is evolved from just talking about outages. And what it would be kind of silly, if you will, to go to a business and just say, you need to make your stuff as fast as possible, right? So I'm trying to speak to like how do people adjust to this new paradigm? Because making it as fast as possible means you'll never end. You'll never know when you've actually finished or reached a goal because, well, you need to make it faster. And then that's number one. Number two, you can't be as fast as Google, right? You're a rich e-commerce site delivering great shopping experiences. As an example, you're never going to be as fast as a white page from Google that just loads a search bar. So the main takeaway, besides the evolution of disruptions and incidents, also includes no list, is be as fast at a minimum as your competition, if not faster than them, because they are only a click away. And we've already talked about this idea of website experience a couple of times, but that's what I wanted to say is like a main takeaway here is like the evolution to think of performances and slowdowns being just as bad as straight outages, and how to think about it, because you can't be as fast as Google, and you can't continually be like, we need to be as fast as possible, right? You need to be realistic. So I hope that's some practical advice. And if I could just continue, we have been talking about this internet performance monitoring, IPM. So just to kind of actually give a little bit of an explanation of what IPM's observability scope is right, the internet stack. So we're talking about visibility into the internet stack to catch issues before they impact your business. Here at Catchpoint, we've been pioneering this concept for years. And the reason to me that it's so powerful is because what it does is it encapsulates and transitions from doing some of these monitoring in silos to a holistic frame for managing digital experiences. So you've got APM for your app stack, IPM for your internet stack. And so now that we've kind of given a little bit about what the actual heck we're talking about here, Sucharita, is this a discussion of growth in IPM? What is the opportunity for our listeners?
Right. So we have seen improvement between 2023 and 2025. So you'll see essentially all of the bad numbers, kind of no IPM or testing on smaller systems, those are going down. And the good numbers, particularly across the full internet stack and enterprise leveraging IPM, going up. So those are definitely things. If this was almost a continuum, you would probably say least desirable on the left, most desirable on the right. But we're still not at the majority. We still have 2/3 of all of the respondents saying that they don't have it everywhere on the stack that Leo described. You just have about half doing it on what they consider critical systems. Now, we didn't ask what was a critical system. You can probably imagine what they were. But I would argue that every system in some way, shape, or form, depending on the time of day, depending on who it touches, can be very, very critical. and having those points of failure of, say, something that you may not think is core, like videos on a product detail page, may not seem that big of a problem if they aren't working, but to a consumer who's about to purchase, it can be incredibly essential, because we know that that's often a driver of conversion. So there's still a lot of upside. Things are improving, and I think that people understand what the issues are, but there's still an opportunity to improve and really get to a standard where this is in the background, and it ends up not even being as much of an area of concern, because it's kind of, you as an organization have it working smoothly and so well that people don't even notice it. Howard, any thoughts there?
I mean, we are definitely seeing organizations implement more and more IPM, which is great to see. We're also what we're seeing, and what Leo's going to talk about finally on that next slide, is a large organization that really has standardized on both APM and IPM together, so that they have that complete visibility from the front end, where the user is, all the way back into the application. And I really identified some phenomenal KPIs out of that, such as reducing MTTI from 3 hours down to 3 minutes. They also announced, and there's definitely some stories on social, that the last holiday season, they had 0 downtime, which is amazing for the amount of sites that sit on the SAP eCommerce system. Leo, I'll let you pick it up from there.
I just want to take a second to say, if I'm so grateful that this organization gave us permission to use their logo and name. If you ever have an opportunity to hear Martin tell the story in his own words, I highly recommend you do so, because there's no way I could possibly do it justice. Having said that, I'll do my darndest. So Howard, you kind of gave an inference to, this organization offering platforms to thousands and thousands and thousands of their customers. And so I'll put the old way or the prior way or, the traditional way in quotation marks. I don't know the best word there, but how they were doing it before was they were taking an application-centric approach to observability instead of an experience-centric approach, that is IPM approach to observability. And what happened when, again, think thousands and thousands of different versions of platforms for different organizations and however many hundreds and hundreds of countries around the globe, when they were able to switch that perspective, invert the triangle, if you will, and focus on the experience, what that actually allowed them to do was then calibrate inward and reduce their spend. And if it didn't impact the experience, then they didn't need the same level of observability, internally, right? What's that Beyonce song? Like, if you want it, should have put a ring on it, right? If it doesn't affect the experience, then put a tear on it, right? That's what they did. So for their critical apps that directly impacted the experience, they used IPM and to determine whether or not their internal components were also critical or non-critical, helping them achieve improvement in these metrics, helping them reduce spend. And it's just a fantastic, wonderful story.
And Leo, just to add, it's also a great just human story, because when the leader noted here took over and was in charge, he was a director, I believe, and he basically took a solution that was struggling and turned it around, was able to improve the customer satisfaction dramatically, improve the overall experiences of the customers by pairing APM and IPM. And that resulted in him being promoted a couple of times. So, we all, want to do something unique and great in our roles so that we get recognized and get promoted. He was able to do this by building out this complete end-to-end solution. It's a great story. You'll see we also, in the chat, we have an upcoming fireside chat with Martin from SAP. Peter put the URL in the chat so that you can register for that pretty easily as well. Back to you, Sucharita.
Yeah, so not all disruptions are created equally. And you see that here in this data where you have certain types, like particularly SaaS applications, that they tend to be much, much more difficult to identify, whereas website disruptions a little bit easier. You also, I think, kind of some important pieces of data here. One is we're talking often about, kind of the digital experience, but there are also, for most of these organizations, physical locations. And we have actually a non-trivial % of disruptions happening in physical locations, particularly at point of sale devices. And while it can be kind of very visible when those disruptions happen because there may be an issue that is affecting a register or that is affecting a particular transaction. Those are not great experiences from a consumer standpoint. So a question you may have is, well, why are some of these numbers differing? And kind of what are some of the underlying characteristics here? And I would argue that probably if we were to map the percent of companies from the previous slide that didn't have comprehensive IPM with those that have a challenge identifying or they have big challenges identifying these disruptions, they're probably somewhat correlated, and having IPM likely leads to making them easier to identify or being more on the moderate challenge part of the scale. So these are definitely challenges that every organization, every IT organization is grappling with, and kind of certainly those at the top of the slide here tend to be more of the under the hood challenges that aren't always visible, that kind of maybe further downstream, not immediate perhaps, but these are absolutely issues nonetheless.
One thing, Sucharita, the message within the data. So just kind of reading very challenging top to bottom: SaaS app, ISP reachability, eCommerce APIs, hosting, point of sale, and physical locations. Third from the bottom, proprietary applications. So the message within the data is that I think people have a bit of a handle on the stuff that they control. And the mindset is kind of coming out of this denial that even though the stuff is outside of your control, that it still is going to impact your customer's experience. And once you realize that to be true, then the capabilities provided by IPM become more relevant. So saying it in a slightly different way, right? Proprietary apps, the code you own versus those top choices, right? Third-party SaaS apps, ISP reachability, third-party APIs, hosting partners. Those are the things that's not code you own. So just kind of jumped out at me is to highlight the need for visibility that can be given by IPM.
And right. And I think that this just continues to reinforce just the need to have the tools that can help an organization anticipate, detect, and fix those problems immediately. So this just continues to reinforce a lot of what we talked about earlier.
I agree. I almost feel like that should be 100%, but What are you going to do?
Well, they may be the ones that are already, further along.
Oh, there you go. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So,
Our existing customers make up the delta.
Existing, exactly. Just to hammer home the point again, we saw some changes from between 2023 and now, and it is continuing to trend in a good direction. You have the percent of people who say that they are experiencing positive business rewards and significant impact in a good way as a result of being able to identify their internet disruptions. That figure is growing, and those that are on, again, the left side, which is the side we want to get away from, those numbers are declining. So things are trending absolutely in the right direction. It is an essential part of organizations in the retail and brand manufacturer ecosystem, and I think that all of this continues to reinforce that.
Agreed. And I don't know about you, Howard, Sucharita, I'm looking at the clock. Looks like we're coming up on 11 minutes. So I just want to jump to this slide here, and then if we have time, maybe we can talk about a couple of other stories or see if there are any additional questions. But Sucharita, maybe just, I know there's a couple of things I want to speak to here, but maybe if you or Howard, if you want to start us off on kind of wrapping up, like things to think about, like a checklist. What do people do after this session is over?
So I think that one of the things that a lot of tech execs face is getting enough either budget for some of these critical tools, or getting enough support from their board or from other C-level executives in advocating for this. So the kinds of things that we have seen work are, first and foremost, to maintain detailed records and estimate your own cost of your disruption. And the more that you can do beyond just, okay, the site was down for this period of time, and generally we generate X number of dollars, and multiplying that out, thinking through also things like lifetime value, thinking through the cost of employee churn. The more comprehensive you can consider those costs, the more that you will make a better business case for making sure that you have budgeting for this. Lobby for IPM solutions when disruptions are large and fresh in stakeholder minds. This is, kind of, nobody wishes for these disruptions, but as we saw on some of those earlier slides, they are inevitable, they are daily. And when there is a larger one, or when there is a C-level executive or their family that calls it out to your tech team, make that, turn it around to an opportunity to get increased budgeting for these solutions. Rally allies through your company. There are no doubt people who are equally frustrated whenever there is downtime, whenever there are disruptions. And the more that you can get them on your side and say that this is the outcome that we would like to have, this is the solution that we can use to get the outcome that we want, the better. It's just always more helpful. I certainly see that when a group of employees are able to make a case versus just one individual. And prioritize these tools during budgeting cycles. And I know that in tech organizations, there's often a distinction between the keep the lights on work and innovation investments. This is absolutely something that needs to go under keep the lights on. Kind of on a list of to-dos, there is every reason to prioritize this and make this one of the top ones. Incorporate ROI from productivity improvements into any type of a cost-benefit analysis. Sometimes these productivity improvements are, kind of just seen as invisible in many ways, especially when they work smoothly. But the more that you can consider and push them to be incorporated into, kind of essentially the ROI of virtually every investment, that can be a positive thing. Seek out case studies with similar users. I know that in the retail world, everybody wants to know what their direct competition is doing. And if you have great examples from your competition having deployed something like this, or even in the contrary, like an outage that your competitor may have experienced, these are all things that that can be very, very compelling to a C-suite. And then also establish experience level objectives. So CX, customer experience, is something that we touched upon. I think that a lot of C-level executives want revenue, but yet customer experience is highly, highly correlated to retention, to lower churn, and ultimately higher lifetime value. And bad experiences and ultimately internet disruptions create that churn, which is that bad customer experience. So consider that as well. These are things that are incredibly important and valuable and are becoming more commonplace in C-suites.
And Sucharita, as I'm rereading, I don't want to make a bad assumption and assume people, can truly appreciate the idea of an experience level objective. So if I could just take a second, just for sake of time, I hope people understand the idea of like a basic service level objective. So a service level objective says, hey, our internal API must respond to requests, 5 nines. Whereas an experience level objective says customers need to be able to go through the purchase cycle, in 4 seconds, 99.9 whatever % of the time, right? It's a complete shift to an experience-based perspective. And the reason that's so important is if you kind of go back and look at some of the previous lines, is it's way more than just the code you own that can impact that experience. So that's kind of the caveat there, is when you shift, it's way more than just what you own. It's all those third parties. It's all those ISP connectivity, reachability components that are another opportunity for failure. And the other thing that an experience level objective does is, by definition, it includes performance, which is a critical evolutionary talk track from this data from 2 years ago, right? Beyond just can you make a purchase, it's can you make a purchase in whatever 5 seconds. And going back to what I was saying earlier, is don't be as fast as you can be. Set an objective. That objective may be based on how fast your competition is. It may be based on some other business contributing factor. But then when you set that objective, then you'll know whether or not you've reached that goal. So that's why it's so critical. Howard, any closing thoughts?
Great thoughts, great summary. Thank you both. What I'd like to do is, if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A or the chat. Sucharita, there is one question asking if you can repeat the global retail figures.
That was $25 trillion for global retail and $5 trillion for e-commerce, of which $3 trillion in e-commerce was transacted in the US and China.
Awesome, thank you. And I've also just opened the poll. If you can all take a look at the poll, and if there's anything that we can help you with, we're more than happy to do so. Other than that, Sucharita, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thanks for the great report. Leo, it's a pleasure as always. There is a poll tab on the right, as Peter just noted, so feel free to jump in there and answer one of the 3 questions if there's anything we can do to help. With that, thank you all. And thanks for spending the time with us.